Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we have on the line with us Ammon Bundy. We just had him on last week, and I wanted to get him on again in light of the Hammond pardon, because we talked about that as being something that was rumored about a month ago, and it was a possibility. But there are other people who are still in jail. And as we saw with the Hammonds, it was very important for a lot of people to come together and approach President Trump and the administration to bring that case before them. Now, he's got a lot of stuff on his plate. There are a lot of things that are happening all the time, and it's very important for them to hear from a lot of different sources about what is really happening. So I want to bring this up again. I wanted to get Ammon's take on the pardons, and I want to talk about Todd Engel and Greg Burleson, who are still in jail, even though the prosecutors willfully misled the court. It resulted in a mistrial and a dismissal for Ammon and for his father, Cliven, his brother Ryan, and others in the second trial. But there were people who had already been convicted and who were still in jail, even though the issue is the same. It's the same information. It was the same stuff that was being withheld from the juries that came out from a whistleblower with the BLM. So joining us now is Ammon Bundy, and you can find them on Facebook at Bundy Ranch. Thank you for joining us again, Ammon.
Thank you for having me, David.
Tell us a little bit about your feelings about the pardon of the Hammonds that just came out in the last 2 days.
Well, David, as you know and many others know, about 2.5 years ago, I became aware of the Hammonds, a little over 2.5 years, and I could see what was happening to them was the same thing that had happened to my family and many others here in the West because of this federal land control of our land and resources. And I could see that, the Hammonds were being unjustly dealt with, that it was just exactly what, the same tactics that they had been imposing upon all the ranchers and miners and loggers and so forth, the land users here in the West. And so I began to speak out as much as I could. I got international attention, but no one with power would listen to me.
Yeah.
And they just wouldn't. I tried to get the county sheriff to look at the facts and the evidence, and he rejected me. And I tried to get the county representatives and the state representatives and even U.S. Congress to look at these issues, and they wouldn't do it. They were afraid, and also they were intimidated by the FBI. And so I guess this now comes full circle, and I'm grateful that President Trump looked at it, that he looked at the evidence that we were trying to present clear back over 2.5 years ago. He saw that it was unjust, that it was not right, that it was prosecutorial misconduct, and he pardoned them. And,
yes, and we're looking at pictures right now as you're speaking. They were flown back, I believe, by the guy who owns Lucas Oil. He flew them back home, I think it was yesterday. And it took a very long time. You were in prison a great deal of time. As we spoke last week, you were talking about how you were beaten in prison. You talked about what they did to you physically in prison, trying to intimidate you guys, I'm sure, into taking some kind of a plea bargain, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's what it's designed. The system has become, the judicial system has become a system which basically pressures a person into admitting to something that he did not do, so that the prosecutors can get a win.
Yeah.
And the Hammonds went through that same thing. Stephen Hammond, just a week or so ago, or a couple weeks ago, marked his 4th year in prison. And I spent 2 years. My father spent 2 years. Several of my brothers and many of my friends spent, 2 years, and there's still Todd Engel and Greg Burleson that are in there still, and now they're marking, over 2.5 years in there. And why? Because they said and stood up and publicly, stood for people like the Hammonds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why,
and that's the thing that we see increasingly, is that they ignore so many things in the Constitution, even the most obvious things about the fact that you have a speedy trial. They keep people in for several years. I've seen this over and over again. And even I talked to a New Jersey weed man about his particular situation. They came after him. He was a marijuana activist. They kept him in jail without bail, saying that it was part of the New Jersey bail reform. But they didn't give you guys bail. They can hold anybody in there if it is an important case to the government. They want to make sure the people don't get out. They want to make sure they can't communicate to people, and they want to intimidate them into accepting a plea bargain. And most people do. I mean, it's almost 100% of the cases now. People will accept a plea bargain rather than go to trial. They don't understand the power of a jury trial. And you guys were hanging tough, but you had to stay in there for a couple of years. And now we've got a couple of guys who are still in jail. As you mentioned, Todd Engel and Greg Burleson. Tell us about that particular case. Again, let's talk about the fact that the judge there, Gloria Navarro, who dismissed your trial, which means that there's not going to be a retrial. First, she declared a mistrial because of the whistleblower evidence. Then they declared a dismissal. And yet, the people that we're talking about, Todd Engel and Greg Burleson, are still in jail, even though they hid evidence from the jury that would have shown them to be innocent.
Yeah, so 98% of people charged by the federal government take plea deals. And then out of the 2% that go to trial, only 3% of those people win in trial. And we think, well, that's because they're all criminals. But that is not true, because the pressure that they put on the 98, well, all of us, that caused the 98% to take pleas is, I can't even explain it to you. I mean, I was not able to hold and touch my wife or children for 2 years. I wasn't even able to see them except through a visiting video camera with horrible sound and horrible video. That's the closest I was able to get to my family. Phone calls, we spend over $100 a week in phone calls. And to get any type of nutrition that you really need, you have to buy it through commissary, which is about 3 or 4 times the cost of a normal product, you know. And people, so you get to the point, and families get to the point where they just can't make it anymore. They just can't, you know, they just break. And then the prosecutors the whole time are saying, hey, if you don't take a deal, we're going to go for 20 years, or we're going to go for, in our case, 106 years, or we're going to go for 5 years. But if you take a deal, then we'll give you 2, or we'll give you 10. And so they finally just say, hey, I can't take it any longer.
And see, this is what the issue is. Regardless, and you guys did this over principle. You did not do this over money. And people should be concerned about this because of the system that you just described. It comes against everybody, especially people who take a political position. We'll be right back with Ammon Bundy. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Ammon Bundy. Again, if you want to get an update with the Bundy family, their Facebook page is at Bundy Ranch. Ammon was just talking to us about the hardships of being in prison, how rigged the system is. Most people succumb to the pressure. It's really not a justice system anymore. They torture people to get the result that they want. Then they rig the jury trial if you're one of the 2% that goes for the jury trial. And then even after they say it's a rigged process and they declare that the government hid information, that the government lied to jurors in previous trials, the same information was used in the conviction of Todd Engel and Greg Burleson, they are still in jail, even though the judge said that they should be dismissed. And so there's more work to be done, even though the Hammonds have been released, and we're very grateful that that has happened. Grateful to President Trump, as well as everybody that has worked to get this information out. And, of course, the Bundys worked very hard along with Lavoy Finicum. He was ultimately killed in terms of trying to get that information out to the people in that area. We're going to try something here and try taking phone calls for Ammon if you've got comments and questions. It's going to be a little bit different because we've got him on a phone line, and because of the restrictions we have here with the number of phone lines that we can have open at any one time. What we'll do is set this up. If you want to call in, it's 888-201-2244, 888-201-2244. If you want to ask a question, we'll take that question. We won't be able to do a follow-up on that, but you can give your question to Ammon, and we'll let him respond to that. Again, that number is 888-201-2244. Ammon, what has your life been like since you've been out of jail? You talked about the fact you couldn't see your family, your children for 2 years, except through an awful monitor. You were suffering from malnutrition, and especially your dad, who's in his 70s, was being starved as well. You have to buy your own food at an expensive price there in prison. Tell us a little bit about things that have happened since you guys have been out. What are you doing now other than advocating for Todd Engel and Greg Burleson and others? And tell us a little bit about your normal life. Have things returned to normal for you?
You know, David, I don't think they'll ever be normal. But they have been enjoyable to be with my family, to be with my little children. I have 6 children, ages 15 to 3 years old. And so 2 years of my 3-year-old's life, I was in prison. And I was able to come home to him on his 3rd birthday. And we also, my family, my dad, my brothers, we're the breadwinners. And so we've had to, you know, immediately go back to work. It was 2 years our family went without income. And so we're back to work and, you know, trying to put the pieces back together. But we feel very blessed. And, I mean, none of us lost our homes. And, you know, we're still happily married and our children are healthy. And
that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Let me ask you about the Hammonds.
It's a great blessing. It's been a wonderful blessing.
That's great. That's great. Let me ask you about the Hammonds, because I know that they had a $400,000 fine against them. That was an effort by the government to try to take away their home. What is their situation as far as that aspect goes? Are you aware of what's going on with that?
I actually don't, although I'm very curious if the pardon requires the government to pay the damages back to the Hammonds, because I know the Hammonds spent close to $1 million in direct legal fees. That's not including the indirect. Wow. They also lost 3/4 of their ranch and was restricted to parts of their private property ranch, graves that the federal government said that they could not use because it was adjacent to other properties. And then just the overall damages to, you know, being in prison for, you know, as long as they were. I sure hope that their damages are restored to them quickly. Yes. They've suffered enough.
Yes, yes. It has been a horrible ordeal for them and for your family as well. All right, we got a question from Stephen in Nevada. Again, we're going to try this, and we won't be able to take a follow-up question, but go ahead and give us your question, Stephen, and we'll let, for Ammon Bundy, and we'll let him reply to that. Stephen in Nevada.
Yes, sir. How's it going, Mr. Bundy? I was actually at the Bundy Ranch, and I hunt the Gold Butte area every year, quail, chucker, and rabbit season. But I guess my biggest question is, out of Las Vegas here, what we could do to help you guys, and what's the next steps going forward to keep our lands open? Because I'm sure you know, every year there's more signs, there's more fences put up, and, you know, they're slowly restricting that area still to this day.
All right. That's a good question. Do we have Ammon back on the line here?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Ammon.
You know, Stephen, to answer that question, it actually hits at the crux of the whole problem here. And that is that these lands need to be controlled by the local people. And not by, you know, some bureaucrat 3,000 miles away who do not know who we are, who do not understand what we do with those lands. And so they need to be controlled and under the jurisdiction of the local people. And also, along with that, because we have established rights, the people have established rights to use, to access, to enjoy, to hunt, fish, camp, hike, to ride ATVs. They've established those rights. But there's also other rights, such as grazing rights, logging rights, and these are property rights. And all of these rights need to be protected. and they all need to be protected by the local jurisdiction. And what's happening is Washington, D.C., agencies such as the Bureau of Land Management are saying that these lands belong to them. And therefore, they can do whatever they want. They can close whatever road they want. They can take whatever they want. They say because the real estate belongs to them, they also own all the land and the resources, the grazing rights. And it actually legally, historically, factually, and morally and constitutionally is not correct. So what we have to do is we have to establish control and jurisdiction over our local lands and control them by the local people.
That's absolutely right. You know, they have, as you point out, they maintain the fact, well, we own this land, even though the Constitution says they're only supposed to own the District of Columbia and certain forts and ports and so forth. Then they legislate without us ever electing them. They come up with their own rules, and they're constantly adding more rules, as Stephen was saying. And then they've got their own army, don't they, Ammon, to patrol this. I mean, this is like an entire new government, and we've got all these different competing governments. Every one of these bureaucracies is like his own little self-contained empire, and they're all building their empire, continually taking our rights and infringing on our rights, saying they own our property, that they own us, that they've got their own army to enforce this. This is the crux of the issue, and this is happening. It's very important what's happening with the BLM, but I want everybody, whether you live in a rural area or rancher, logger, miner, farmer, whatever, that you don't have to be to see that this is the same type of thing that is happening even if you live in the city. This is the same type of thing that's happening with every bureaucracy in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, kind of to add to that, David, because you're exactly right. People need to understand that the court and the elected representatives always follow the people historically. And so, but what we have been duped into believing is that we have to run to the court and we have to try to get our elected representatives somehow to defend our rights first. And it's not our, it's not our right or duty to defend them first. And let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. And what I'm saying is the people have to...
Well, hang on. We got to take a break, and we'll get that example when we come back, and we'll take more of your calls. We've got Habu in Wisconsin, Matthew in Florida, taking your calls for Ammon Bundy. We'll be right back right after this break. Again, you can find them on Facebook at Bundy Ranch. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. All right, let's go back to Ammon. Ammon, you wanted to... you were giving an example, and then we're going to go to some of these questioners here who are holding online. Go ahead.
Yeah, so... I'm going to point to the civil rights issues when it comes to the black community, because in the 13th Amendment making slavery illegal or unlawful was ratified in December 6, 1865. Mm-hmm. But if you remember, the civil rights riots and issues really came about 100 years later.
Yeah.
And so if they were truly given freedom in 1865, then why are they still having to fight, stand up for their freedom in 1960s? And
That's right.
And why did they ultimately get the court? Why did they ultimately get the courts to start ruling their way? It's because people like Rosa Parks said, "I'm not sitting in the back of the bus," or I'm not going into the white man's bathroom. I'm not drinking I'm going to drink in the white man's drinking fountain. They started demanding equal rights, even though 100 years later it was given to them.
If you don't do that, it's nothing but a piece of paper, and they will not enforce it.
And then the courts follow, and then the elected representatives follow. And that's the same with these land issues. Do not let them close your roads. Do not let them put signs on your land. They do not own it. They have control of it, but they do not own it, and it is unlawful what they're doing.
That's right. Absolutely right. And a couple of more examples. I mean, we've been talking about medical marijuana. Look at the fact that we have this war on drugs that was created by the United Nations, even though it was, put in 10 years later by Richard Nixon. We've had 60% of the states say we're going to allow medical use of marijuana. They haven't done anything about that. We've had pastors say that you're not going to take away our tax deduction if we talk about politics. They haven't done anything about that. We've had people come in and say we're going to protect our children with armed teachers that have been trained and vetted, and they haven't done anything about that. That's a clear violation of a law that was enacted that was in violation of our Second Amendment. So if we stand up for our liberty, they will stand down. That's a very good point, Ammon. Let's take a question from Habu in Wisconsin. Go ahead, Habu.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Knight, for this opportunity. And hello to Mr. Bundy. Yeah, just two very quick points. The shining light or the optimistic part of this is that juries in the Mountain West, in your part, region of the world or of this country, are not afraid to nullify, unlike many juries in the rest of the country. They stand up and they make their votes count, so to speak. And the second thing is after the last trial was dismissed with prejudice, I just heard in the news that it has been resuscitated again. Could you please shed the light of the state of affairs with the federal government giving you more grief?
All right, very good question. And I think Ammon didn't. They came back for a second hit, and I think didn't Judge Navarro shut them down a second time, but they just keep coming, right?
Yeah, they filed for a motion for the judge to reconsider her decision on dismissing the case. She denied that, and of course they might appeal that. But either way, this is just really bad for them because they blatantly lied. They withheld exculpatory evidence. They, withheld evidence to the jury and from the defendants. And so if they want to go at it again, let's go at it again, because we literally have a book full of discovery of their misconduct, their lies. But I don't think that the government, the courts, are going to allow that to happen because it's just too much exposure for them.
Yeah. They were caught with this whistleblower releasing these documents. They were caught lying about their actions. They did have snipers there. They finally had to admit that. They wouldn't let people know about the special agent in charge who had been convicted of crimes himself. They wouldn't let anybody talk about any of the actions of the BLM, and they lied about what the BLM was doing. Don't throw me in that briar patch, I guess it was. I know you don't want to have that fight again, but it's going to really, really be bad for them if they were to bring that up again. Let's go to Matthew in Florida. Go ahead, Matthew. Matthew, there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, go ahead. Ask your question to Ammon Bundy.
Hey, Ammon, you kind of answered a little bit of my question, but I was just curious, what type of dirty prosecutorial tactics did they use against you? Did they not have transcripts of certain hearings and court proceedings, and what other tactics did they use against you?
Okay, Ammon, go ahead.
Well, I would love to go into specifics, and maybe we could do that sometime, but I just don't have enough time. So I'll just be general here, maybe hit one or two. When we talk about our judicial system, if you want to call it that now, the 3% that actually go to trial, what happens is the prosecutors, in conjunction literally with the judges, do not allow the jury to hear the truth. And they do that. What goes on, what went on in our case is very common. It's just they don't get caught very often. And we just kept pushing until, we exposed it. And this case had a lot of publicity, so we had the power to do that. But they withhold evidence from almost every trial in order to win. They did it with the Hammonds. Yeah. I mean, they withheld evidence that the BLM actually started those fires. We have witnesses that testified that they saw the BLM with drip torches around the Hammonds' home on the 2006 fire. And we have radio transcripts of them. They would not let that in the Hammonds' trial.
Wow.
And so those are the types of things that have been going on and are not just isolated to our case.
Yeah. Yeah, withholding evidence that would prove them innocent. Just yesterday I was talking to Eugene Warwick. This is a guy who worked in Chicago, and this is why I say if we have a corrupt justice system, it doesn't matter whether you are a truck driver in Chicago or whether you are a farmer or a rancher in Nevada. It's still that corrupt judicial system. And what they had in his case, Ammon, was he had won against the city of Chicago in terms of patronage. They would not give him the reward, and then they altered the transcripts. And when he stumbled on a situation where he found the original transcripts with the sticky notes saying how they were going to change it, and then the altered transcripts that they got back from that, he said, well, I understand there are tapes or something. Somebody told him there were audio tapes, and the judge says, no, I'm not going to give you those audio tapes, which is a clear violation there. But he actually got the judge to admit that there were audio tapes, and even to say that he wasn't going to give them the audio tapes. That's the amazing corruption. You're talking about going to a jury trial, they withhold evidence, witnesses and transcripts showing that they set the fires there at the Hammonds, and they won't allow that information into the trial to the jury. And I think that's another reason why jury nullification is very, very important. That's the other place where they lie to everybody. They don't tell the jury that they're there to judge not only the facts of the case, they tell them exactly the opposite. No, you can't judge the law. You're only there to judge the facts of the case. You can't say anything. If you don't disagree with the law, the way it's being applied, you don't have anything to say about that. Well, we're out of time, but thank you for joining us again, Ammon Bundy. You can find them at Bundy Ranch. That's our program today. Thank you for joining us.
Staying healthy on the go is just as important as staying healthy at home. But sometimes supplements don't work fast enough. That's why InfoWars Life has created a powerful new addition to the Super Blue line, Super Blue Silver Immune Gargle. Available in 1 ounce, 3.5 ounce, and 16 ounce bottles, Immune Gargle is perfect for the bathroom, kitchen, or wherever you go. The incredible new purifying formula is dentist recommended for daily use whenever you feel like you need to stay clean. As a powerful hand purifier or oral cleansing formula, just a small spray will help you stay clean when you feel surrounded by toxins. With powerful yet simple ingredients, Immune Gargle features Silver Sol Nano Silver for a powerful cleansing alternative. With Super Blue Silver Immune Gargle, staying toxin-free is easy and affordable. Help stop the spread of toxins and stay healthy with Super Blue Silver Immune Gargle. Only available at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com.